Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of council to order. Our clerk today will be Ms. Karen Robertson. Motion to proceed in camera, please. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 30th regular meeting of council. I'd like to first recognize we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Karen Robertson. Tonight's regular meeting of council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. And members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically, but I'm delighted tonight to see all of council here present physically. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items, Ms. Robertson, and we have several.
Yes, thank you, Worship. The first is a delegation for Deborah Hollins and Jason Harrison, and they are removed for tonight. They will be coming to the next council meeting. The city plan bylaw number 6600, there is a PowerPoint presentation to be added to that under item 12A. And we have 3 delegations this evening speaking to development permit application 1219 for 2498 Rosstown Road. That's Tyler Hansen, Blair Duick, and Adam Compton.
Thank you very much. Motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. On to the mayor's report. I think I'll commence with the obvious tonight. All of council are wearing their bicycle t-shirts. Yesterday, Sunday, was the kickoff of Go by Bike Week. Actually, it's going on for a little longer than that. I particularly want to commend Councillors Bonner and Hemmons, who were out in full force and are serious cyclists. Even I myself attended on a bicycle but did not participate in the route around town. Having regard to my age and health, I figured if I could scrape home to Departure Bay, that was enough. I do want to commend the number of people who put the day together, though, and came out to support it, and particularly those who had good things to say about the bike lanes, which I know cause consternation for some of our citizens, but in fact are attracting a number of people, and I know that because I passed a number of them, or rather they passed me yesterday. The other item of importance, and we all have to turn our minds to this, is the recruitment of workers for the 2022 general local election set for October 15th. The city is seeking experienced election workers for the 2022 general local election. Anyone interested can fill out an application form and submit it via email to elections@nanaimo.ca or drop it off in person to the Legislative Services Department in the City Hall located at 455 Wallace Street. There's a variety of positions available. Obviously, you have to be available to work on the election day itself, and they must remain neutral and cannot publicly support candidates. I'm also happy to announce that the mayors of BC cities that host West Coast League teams are taking this season personally for their communities. That includes a number of us. A BC Cup has been launched, a trophy that will go to the mayor's office of the BC-based team that produces the most wins in head-to-head games between clubs in Canada's best province. The Kelowna Falcons, Victoria Harbour Cats, and their mayors are obviously on board, as is Mayor Christian of Kamloops, myself, Mayor Colin Basran, Mayor Lisa Helps, etc. So we're all hoping that everyone will take a great interest in baseball this year as the world returns to some form of normal. And as I said, I'm very excited by the prospect that our fresh new team will in fact be the champions as expected and do Nanaimo proud. No pressure. On a less than cheerful note for some people, but I remind everyone what Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, that taxes are the price we pay to belong to civilized society. The city has mailed out our 2022 property tax notices, so please check your mailbox. They were sent out this week. You can skip the lineup at City Hall if we have one and pay your property taxes online. Another option is to set up pre-authorized withdrawal plans with the city. July 4th is the due date for property tax payments, and if eligible, to claim the homeowner grant. To apply for the pre-authorized payment plan, property owners must complete the form on the city website at www.nanaimo.ca/go-to/pause. The average home will pay an additional $204 in City of Nanaimo taxes and user fees. Additional levies do come, however, from other agencies, so please don't think it's all of us here at City Hall going after you. That includes the Vancouver Island Regional Library, the Regional District of Nanaimo, Regional Hospital District, School District number 68, BC Assessment, and of course the Municipal Finance Authority. BC Assessment is responsible for the valuation of properties within the City of Nanaimo. I would remind everyone, the overall residential assessment values in Nanaimo have increased by an average of 30.7% in the last year. So I appreciate and I realize it won't give much comfort to some people, but if you consider what you're paying in increased taxes versus the non-taxable wealth increase you've seen in your private residence, one should take some comfort in that. And I will say at this point that I am extremely proud, as is council, of all the workers for our city who in the last couple of years through difficult times have continued to deliver services notwithstanding COVID and all the problems that have arisen from that. We have one item to rise and report on, Ms. Robertson. We can report on that tonight, and that is the appointment of Councillor Tyler Brown to the Social Planning Organization, or no, yes. Systems Planning Organization, which will take us forward with a budget of $480,000 a year for the next 5 years, hopefully bringing coordination to the delivery of services by various levels of government and agencies in our city. That is it for me. The next one is one that I'm very pleased to welcome, which is a presentation by the Children's Health Foundation of Vancouver Island, Reed Jesse's House. Ms. Carroll, CAO, good evening. Welcome to council and welcome to a bit of an entourage you've brought with you tonight, all well recognized, and I can say this with some confidence, generally popular people in our community.
I only hang out with the best of them, yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Krogh and council, for the invitation to come and talk to you today. Just a bit of background. Who are we? Children's Health Foundation has invested in the health of island kids for more than 95 years. Our mission is to ensure that all island families have access to the health care that they need when and where they need it most. Thanks to the generosity of our donors, and we are 100% funded by donors, so no government dollars, we are able to bring supports closer to home and help transform the lives of children and youth living with physical and mental health challenges. We know that kids may be only 21% of our island's population, but they are 100% of our future. So we have been working in the Nanaimo community, and we've listed a number of projects that we're particularly fond of, and I would draw your attention to the work that we did with the City of Nanaimo to create the Maffeo Sutton Inclusive Playground, and certainly there's a great picture of everyone enjoying that. But we are in the community for the long haul, and we've set up temporary routes with office space in the CDC while we build our next project. So what is our next project? Families from across the islands find themselves in Nanaimo for healthcare, and the Nanaimo General Hospital hosts one of 2 NICUs, neonatal intensive care units, on the island, and the other pediatric clinical care. Nanaimo also hosts additional community-based healthcare services such as dental and assessments, and families who are coming for birth travel from rural and remote communities to relocate in Nanaimo in advance of their due date. So the inspiration for Jessie's house. Jessie was born in Nanaimo April 16th, 2013 at 29 weeks. She was medevaced to Victoria. While in Victoria, Jessie's family stayed at Janice Place for 2 weeks. Baby Jessie was transported back to the NICU in Nanaimo. Jessie was discharged and experienced her own loving home for 1 week before she unexpectedly passed away at just 6 weeks and 4 days old. Sherry, a nurse at NRGH, noticed that families traveling to Nanaimo had a very different experience than the one she had in Victoria. Her family felt the comfort and safety of Janice Place. Families at NRGH were struggling with the expense of hotels, taking buses and taxis across town to be with their children or sleeping in their vehicles. So to honor Jessie's life, Sherry, Mike, and big sister Marlee started Jessie's Gift Foundation, an organization that raises funds to ease the journey of families whose children are receiving care at NRGH. Children's Health Foundation has partnered with Jessie's Gift Foundation to realize the bold dream of bringing a home away from home to Nanaimo. Now I'm going to show a picture here, but I have to first start by saying that Island Health has not given us approval to actually use the site. We're still in negotiations. We know that this is very, very preliminary discussions, but talks are underway. So this is the site where the home will go, and it's adjacent to the hospital. And for those of you who know the grounds, and I've got my colleagues here who can give you exact locations, but we know that proximity to the hospital is a really important factor for the most important piece for the success of the home. So what do we know? The community benefits. When we build a home away from home near healthcare services, we see evidence of improved health outcomes for island families across the island when they have access to safe, affordable accommodation. This photo is a photo of a Campbell River mom of 5 who was overwhelmed with emotion when learning a home away from home existed in Victoria so she could stay there while her twins, Lucy and Clara, received care. So some of the benefits include, close proximity to healthcare services, reduced financial burden for families while they're trying to care for their kids, a safe, inclusive, and friendly space for families to call home and find comfort. Amenities include a kitchen, big kitchen, cultural space, multi-purpose activity room, patio area, playground. And we've noticed that there are many relationships formed between families who are sharing experiences while staying at the home. And here is the Gabriel family from Port McNeill who stayed at Janice Place this past spring. And there's just a bit of a quote there from the family. So our process. These are a couple of photos from when we were doing the blessing with the Weewakai and the Weewakam Nation and Mayor Andy Adams up in Campbell River as we were launching the project. So our process, we're committed to a thoughtful design and building process that includes reflection on past experience, building 2 other homes, so that's Janice Place and Kolayu House. We do functional planning that includes intentional conversations with stakeholder groups. So for Nanaimo, we have completed the initial functional planning process, and we're ready to get to work, but we can't do it alone. So while building Janice Place and Kolayu House, we had tremendous support from First Nations, municipal governments, and other leaders and champions for healthcare. The City of Campbell River was helpful in navigating the building process. Mayor Adams sat on our building committee, and they were very generous in waiving fees. So Qualayu House opened in August of 2021, and families have stayed more than 400 nights since the house first opened. It includes 10 bedrooms with private baths, a large shared kitchen, living room, quiet rooms, and other shared spaces. And the house sees many families who need to relocate weeks in advance of their due date to deliver their babies. We also see families passing through who are seeing dentists, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and other community-based care. And we put up here the annual operating costs are $450,000 because we provide 24/7 staff support for the house. Janice Place, we have a bit more experience, having celebrated the 10th anniversary just this past January. So it was built on the grounds of the Victoria General Hospital, and it officially opened in January of 2012. It is a 10-bedroom facility with many amenities, including a large shared kitchen, living room, media room, playground, garden, and art room. So it is on the Vic General Hospital site, yet it's tucked away. So unless you knew what you were looking for, you wouldn't know that it was there. It has a calming and nature-filled setting, and since opening, it's welcomed thousands of families and has an average occupancy rate of about 90%. Most island donors help fund some of the capital costs for the build and continue to fund its annual operating costs, which we budget approximately $470,000 annually for. And Victoria is the proud host community for this incredible home in the same way we know Nanaimo will be for Jesse's house. So our next steps. Architect Alan Lowe. Alan designed both Janice Place and Qualayu House. And we're thinking that Jesse's house will be a blend of these two homes. We envision a place for families to land while waiting for delivery of their babies, as well as housing families who have babies in the NICU or receiving pediatric care at the hospital. We will welcome families who are traveling from rural and remote communities who are accessing community care in Nanaimo. Our first stages of the functional planning process are complete, and Alan has sort of started his design. We plan to create a space that is functional and welcoming and environmentally conscious with a net zero plan. This project has been many, many, many years, should I say many years in the making. While waiting for this resource to be developed, many families have struggled to receive the care they need. Knowing that there is a great need, we are keen to move the project forward as soon as possible. And I think that is the end. Yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you, if I may, I just want to thank the delegation, the presenters for coming, all of you. I know there's several here in attendance today. Sounds like an extremely worthwhile project, and I want to say that you had me at the words, no government funding involved. But good luck with the fundraising. As you may be aware, there is a growing interest in this area to see an expansion of our regional hospital services and offerings, which I think is badly needed. But it seems to me that this project fills a bit of a missing piece, and that is to offer a place for families to be involved while patients are at the hospital. In your next steps, you mentioned about groundbreaking, but I also heard you say that the site has not definitely been approved yet by Island Health. Could you just clarify?
Well, we've received conditional approval, but there are a number of obstacles that we still have to address, so we're in the process of doing that. We hope to be able to talk about it more formally in the coming months, but With respect to Island Health, I have to say that no, we have not been given 100% approval.
Well, I wish you good luck as you move ahead with that, and I look forward to seeing this as part of the expansion and growth of our regional hospital. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. Can you tell me how families cope right now without this service in place? What does that look like?
Well, I know that anecdotally, it's very stressful. I mean, you know, women who are coming for birth, for example, delay until a possible last moment to come, putting themselves and, you know, their future children at risk. They will often sleep in their cars. They will be put up in, you know, sometimes questionable sleeping arrangements, whether it's, you know, downtown and they're unable to get to the hospital in a timely way. But I think that everybody's just trying to do the best that they can, knowing that, you know, they must come here sometimes to in days, weeks in advance. And so financial stress, leaving behind their support systems, you know, it never gets any better when the stories come to us. So we have another program that families have been accessing for funding, for accommodation, for travel, our Bare Essentials program. So we have some numbers and the stories once again. So we know that there's a great need, and it's such a modest investment. Yes, it's a multi-million-dollar project to build, but it is a modest annual investment. And, you know, for example, the longest stay at Janice Place was 368 days. So I can't imagine any family being able to cope with that financially anywhere other than at Janice Place. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I have friends who stayed in Janice's place. They had a fourth child who was quite sick, and so completely understand the value of what you're providing there.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Very worthwhile project. I'm just wondering if you will be presented to the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital Board?
I think we are. Yeah, I think so. I think that's the plan.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's the political table to be at. So
Yeah.
look forward to hearing you there. Everyone except for Councillor Turley sits at that board, so thank you.
Okay, yeah.
If I may, thank you very much, and I'm not saying this to attract any sympathy, but I was badly burned when I was 4 years old and spent, I think it was, I'm told, 6 weeks in Nanaimo Hospital, and my family was in Coombs, and it was no doubt problematic for them to come and see me. So I'm somewhat conscious of the challenges this places on families, and I think this is a wonderful project. And I did, notwithstanding what Councillor Thorpe had to say, we can always forego certain charges, I'm sure, at the appropriate time. Not that I'm suggesting for a moment that council would ever make a decision about anything, but if your heartstrings haven't been plucked tonight, you have no heart. I think this is a marvelous orchestra here, so I think they've all been plucked appropriately. Thank you for taking a time to do this tonight, and thank you to those who've come out to support you. As I say, their faces are recognized, and the work you've undertaken so far towards this is appreciated.
Great. Thank you. Thanks.
The next presentation is the Mid-Island Business Initiative Society Representatives Re-Increased Challenge of Attracting Workers. Mr. Holland. Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, close. Good evening, Your Worship.
Mr. Delves, you're always welcome to come to council if you...
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's lovely to be here. Honorable councillors and staff, thanks for the opportunity to be here this evening. So again, my name is Mike Delves. I'm representing the Mid-Island Business Initiative. So we're a group of business individuals, businesses within the community with a goal of facilitating and encouraging economic activity. So one of the impediments to economic activity that we're finding in our region is the availability and affordability of housing, and of course driven partially by the availability of real estate therefore. So we applaud council and staff's activities with the Reimagine Nanaimo and OCP process, and so we'd like to take the opportunity to present this evening some input into that process as presented. So we've invited Mark Holland of Holland Planning to do so. So here's Mark.
Thank you very much. Mr. Holland, good evening.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council. It's been a while since I've been here. I followed my wife down island for her career and haven't been back in a while, so it's a real pleasure. Thank you. I just have a few slides here. This work was done for a private landowner last year, and the discussion that emerged from that led to more discussions, which led us to a conversation with the Mid-Island Business Initiative, which then led to the invitation to come here. So that was the history of this, and I'll just talk a little bit about your OCP. I wanted to cover just a little bit about the land and housing needs and the draft plan. I'll do just a few comments about some sub areas on this and the infill scenarios, and then draw some conclusions. I'd like to start by saying that this is a great OCP. I'm not here to criticize your OCP. I love your OCP. I think it's a brilliant 50-year plan for this community. What I am here to talk about is the struggle we're having with housing supply, and I want to speak a little bit to the challenges that the OCP presents in regard to that. CMHC and most folks who track housing know that you need about 5 to 6 times the amount of housing on the market that you need in any unit of time. They call this a 5 to 6 months of inventory. We haven't been reaching that for a long time. We've had a lot of structural problems with housing supply. As Mike mentioned here at the introduction, it's very difficult to grow your firm, we're having so many stories here in the Mid-Island Business Initiative talking about this and the struggle to get staff, and housing is one of the key issues. Housing inventory, the graph on the left is housing prices in Nanaimo pre-pandemic. It stops at 2019. You'll see the curve beginning to go up quite a bit around 2015. We've seen this all up and down Vancouver Island. The graph in the lower right is island statistics because housing markets cover many, many different communities. We crossed that sort of balanced market of that appropriate inventory a long ways back around 2015, and you can see the inventory there is really dropped far below where we need to be, and that's one of the things that triggers the housing prices. The table above was from your Colliers report that I'll reference a few times here. And to 2019, when you began the OCP process, about then, when they did that test, there was only 36 units available in the entire city, all different housing types for a city of 100,000 people. So we're facing some very, very significant challenges. The OCP is one of the most powerful cornerstones in addressing housing supply. Your growth is fantastic. It's exciting. It's just making the city become more and more exciting year by year. You're projected to accommodate roughly around 40,000 new people in the next 25 years. If we break it into a simple line, that's about 1,600 to 1,800 people a year. Your plans are to put most of those in multifamily, which generally range roughly 2 people per unit on average. So we need to have completed, developed, and occupied 800 to 900 units a year in order to meet your current growth trajectories. The Colliers study was an interesting one in that they laid out how many hectares of land you would need. They concluded just under 600 hectares. They then did an analysis of the open land that was available in your city and concluded you had about 600 hectares of open land. 2 challenges have since emerged during the OCP process. One is that some of that open land has now been redesignated as industrial or as other uses. And the other challenge, so that's not available anymore. And the other challenge is that the growth areas in your current OCP are not necessarily aligned with the open land. And so the challenge that we face now is the majority of the growth needs to go in infill. So this is your current draft OCP plan. I know it's being revised and come forward. The primary areas of the red and the brighter colors are where most of the density was proposed, other than purple, which is industrial, and the map on the right were the open areas for development, and you can see that there's a bit of a misalignment. Now, this is not a big problem, but it shapes the ability to bring housing supply on. We could spend all evening here talking through this great city and all the different sub-areas. I just want to flag a couple of things in the plan. There's an exciting urbanization agenda here, which I think we all support and is great. These red areas are in your main commercial areas with the building blocks in the OCP plan. These are slated for fairly high density and mixed use with a lot of residential. Unfortunately, the reality of the development industry is that they almost never develop parking lots, and a lot of these areas are parking lots. So in this case, you'll see that while the vision is for some significant density and mixed use, there are very few examples where this actually occurs, and where they do are usually in very large cities. The reason why is that underground parking is $40,000 to $60,000 a stall, and to replace the lost parking with only maybe 12 stories of growth, there's simply not enough money in it. The banks won't lend the money for this. And so the redevelopment of parking lots just very, very rarely happens. Certainly not for any successful area. And in this case, we have Canadian Superstore, Home Depot, Costco, Woodgrove, HomeSense, all those areas, Cabela's that are included in this. So the capacity in the OCP is a fantastic 50-year plan, but it won't be operationalized anytime very soon. There are some areas, you can see the Green Thumb site there, and some others that will have a chance to move forward, and I'll speak about them in a moment. The North Nanaimo Mall area, again, a big challenge for the operational areas for most of that mall. With Sears no longer there, the need for that parking at that end is now less of a question, and we might be able to get some development if someone chooses to go in there. I know there's been discussions about this. That being said, there was a lot of commercial in the Sandstone area that was intended to absorb your future growth. That is no longer in that plan. There's very little commercial left, and so this may be needed again in future. Exciting redevelopment opportunities along Metro Drive and also further east from the Longwood area. Most of those will require, all of Metro Drive will require the removal of the existing homes and those family homes and condos being put in place. The Country Club, again, similar, that parking will be required, so most of the development that might occur here will occur immediately adjacent, impacting the homes that are there and the smaller businesses that are further east of that. Also, Uplands is envisioned to begin to redevelop from single family to multifamily. The Bowen Road Hospital area, again, the hospital that we were just talking about, not a lot of redevelopment opportunities there. Parking lots, fairly successful commercial areas, and unlikely to have a wholesale redevelopment of those areas. There are a few sites along Bowen Road that might work out, and near the Nanaimo Golf Course. Again, many of those will require removing existing businesses and homes. The VIU Harewood area is an exciting potential, and I think if there was any advocacy, it would be to go bigger in Harewood. With the university and the transit focus and the closer to the old city, this is an exciting area. Right now, the growth is focused just on a couple of streets, and I think there's a big opportunity to do more there. Unfortunately, the current president of VIU, with all, doing a great job of leading that institution forward, the COVID reality resulted in the closure of its development trust. So as of now, and for the foreseeable future, there is no mechanism to redevelop any of the lands on VIU. They require a special trust to be able to do that, and that's been closed. The immediately adjacent area, obviously, as you know, DND Lands is in discussions around treaty. Its future is unknown. When I did the comprehensive community plan for this Nanaimo about 15 years ago, it was not slated for residential, it was for a commercial business park. We don't know where that is. Bottom line is it's going to take a while to process all of that and be able to get that land into the discussion. I think if there's one location in your city that really embodies the title of Reimagine Nanaimo, it's your old city area. This is a really bold revisioning of this old city area. That being said, there's some real challenges under the ground between rock contamination and mines. Putting in large buildings in this area is going to present some very interesting challenges, and we already see the ups and downs of some of those, like Howard Johnson and others, and what they're going through. So the community association here is also very intelligent, very educated, and very organized, and the impact to heritage here will create some challenges, as we all lived through with 388 McCleary and Molnar's proposal. So heading into the last just section here of discussion, housing to be provided. When the surveys were done for your OCP, over 90% of the people surveyed wanted a single family home. That's understandable, that's pretty common. The number who wanted to live in a 6-story condo or a mixed use one were down around 1 in 3 or less. The modeling done with Colliers was about a 60-40 multifamily to ground oriented ratio in this process, and that's where the numbers emerged from, was that discussion. Which brings us to the two big sponges for growth in this plan, the Green Thumb site and the Sandstone site. Now of interest, the Green Thumb site and the Sandstone site combined, I believe, are around 4,700 units in the OCP. We'll have to see what hits the ground in the zoning. Both, however, need a lot of work before either will have anybody sleeping or living in that place. Both need rezoning, both need a subdivision plan, both need to have all the servicing built, they need to have the land titles offices complete, all of that. Those sites then need to be sold to developers, which require development permits, the detailed design, pre-sales financing, building permits. Then we construct those, then the rest is finished and sold. There's unlikely to be any action inside of 5 years or anybody living on any of those sites, and most of the growth in these, I predict, will be in your next OCP cycle. So the other observation is that both of those combined will barely support 5 years of growth here in the city. So if we could wave a magic wand and they were both finished tomorrow morning, we would be out of capacity within 5 to 6 years just from selling those out. So I won't go through the summary, just other than to say that the next 10 years of growth will be absorbed in existing neighborhoods, which is where I want to conclude here with these observations and the issue of housing supply and housing price. We ran some very just general scenarios for how this would work. One was a 25-story tower. These are about $100 million to build. You get about 200 units, 400 people. They take a minimum of 7 years from land assembly to completion. So over the course of a project like that, they absorb about 60 people a year. We need to absorb 1,600 to 1,800 a year. So you can imagine how many cranes and how much land assembly and how many towers would need to be underway in order to do that. We didn't model that because there's no builders here in Nanaimo that build concrete towers. There's hardly even any in Victoria. Most all of them come from a few of the big cities. We focused on the other two, which are missing middle, the townhouse model and the 6-story wood frame condo building or apartment building. In the townhouse model, we took 2 7,000 square foot lots. This would be a typical requirement, put 8 units on them. We removed 2 old houses and one of them had a suite in this scenario. That netted out, we took out 3, we added 8, we netted 5. That's about 10 to 13 people for absorption. It takes for growth, it takes 3 years to complete these. So basically we absorb 3 to 4 people of the 16 to 1,800 per year with a missing middle townhouse model. With the 6-story infill, we put in 54 units on 6 stories. We took 3 lots, removed 3 old houses and 1 suite. That nets out 50 units at 2 people a unit is 100 people over 4 years, a much better absorption rate of 25 people per year overall per project. We then moved forward to see what this would actually look like. Now in this case, we're only using half of your growth rate. You've been growing at around 2% a year. This is 1%. We presumed that the 1% would go somewhere else, the other 1%, either to maybe one of the big greenfield projects if this is later in your OCP cycle, or maybe to other areas. Most folks will commute 30 to 40 minutes to live in the house they want, and that essentially means your housing shed is between Duncan and Parksville. So we presume that half of the growth would occur probably either in the 2 greenfield projects or even outside the city altogether. So within the city, to absorb 1/2 of your current growth rate, we projected 33% of ground-oriented townhouses and 2/3 of it in 6-story apartments, just for the scenario. At the end of this 10-year OCP period, you would need 200 townhouse projects and 60 6-story buildings. We would displace about 1,600 people from current housing in those areas and require the demolition of just shy of 1,000 existing homes in order to handle the infill to follow this. So I'll just leave you with our final conclusion. The OCP is a great plan, but it's a very long-term plan. Our challenges with housing for the Mid-Island Business Initiative and all of our businesses is short-term, and we need more land now. The major greenfield sites are excellent, but they'll only absorb half a decade of growth. And the new apartments replacing the older housing will be smaller. They'll be a different type of housing. This balanced residential market is going to require a lot more supply than even what I've shown you here. We do need to have more being built than actually is needed on a regular basis to handle the excess, so that folks aren't in bidding wars around things. And the final request to you is to consider in your OCP and in your current regional growth planning with RDN to rationalize your city boundaries, many of which are historical and arbitrary, how they ended up there. You have servicing to the boundaries in many areas of your city. You're going to need new land. You're going to need more land than you have now if the housing crisis is not going to get worse. So it was an encouragement in your OCP to include special study areas all around your city and to commence that discussion with RDN to bring in additional lands so that you have more capacity with less time to fewer public hearings for every single house and every single building in order to move forward. So I want to thank you for the discussion, the chance to be able to present some of this research to you. I'm available for questions now or later, should you wish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holland. Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One thing that you've said that has always concerned me, and you talked about like we need the 6 stories, 12, 25 stories, whatever, which goes against what a lot of our communities want. And it's supposed to be an official community plan. So I always struggle with that because I feel I'm supposed to represent the community, not shove down their throats what I feel they need to have. So I struggle with that. And my second point is the fact that everything you've talked about is based on 2 people living in a house. Yet we see that there's lots more people coming here with families, and we don't have that. So have you addressed that at all, or do you have ways that we could look at addressing that?
Yeah, I'm using the sort of traditional numbers that are typically used for these kinds of areas. The family housing and the size of family housing to get to your 3 bedrooms, that would be your townhouse model. And I think you saw how much land that takes up in order to get some ground-oriented housing with, say, 3 bedrooms for kids. It's not done that often. The townhouses are much less profitable than either condos or than houses, so they aren't done as often as we might want them to be done. The family housing is critical, Councillor. It is an absolute fundamental challenge and problem, and any of the types of housing that support families require even more land, not less, in order to do that.
So I read Patrick Condon's stuff quite often, and one of the points that he raised was that we're not building the type of homes that people want, and especially when we're looking at seniors. Like, I know many of my friends are in 5,000-6,000 square foot houses, 2 of them, because we're not building level entry homes for them, so they stay in their level entry great big houses. Is there a way that you can see around that so that we can open up those big, large houses that they don't actually want to be in, but don't move because of accessibility issues, because they need the level entry for their, different health issues?
Through your worship, yes, the approach to building new homes, there's a misnomer that homes on greenfield land or on the edge is sprawl. Sprawl is not an actual location. It's a land use pattern that results in certain transportation and other social patterns. We have lots of sprawl within the existing city of Nanaimo right now, but new homes can have that diversity. We can design and develop new communities that do have single-family homes, that do have multifamily homes, that do have enough bedrooms and accessibility for these folks. It's just part of the planning process to actually do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. In order, Councillors Bonner and Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Holland, last time I had the pleasure of listening to was at our MLA's Walker's event, and you talked about the idea of a linear city as opposed to circular centers at which is in our OCP, and I thought it was phenomenal, right? Your presentation today, though, seems to be moving away from that, in that this concept of using greenfield and edge growth doesn't align with building cities along our corridors. And so I'm curious because Collier's report, which I read again just a couple of weeks ago, specifically says we need X amount of hectares, and we have that. And I would, on page 155 of our OCP plan here, it says there is enough service land either vacant or underutilized within Nanaimo's UCB, urban containment boundaries, to accommodate projected demands for housing to 2046 and commercial and industrial lands until 2041. And so it says here that we're okay, right? And you're saying we're not? Like,
through your worship, the linear corridor urbanism that we were talking about, that is completely consistent with either one. You can either redo your city on corridors, which you have, which I think is your corridor zoning is something I talk about sometimes with other cities. It's an excellent example of what to do. Wide diversity of uses along corridors. That's how we get our transit. That's how we get our walkable, diverse neighborhoods. Greenfield can be done exactly the same way. So really you end up with a network of complete neighborhoods that are all walkable along a transit line that finds their way out, where that corridor becomes the center rather than some hypothetical central business district. Nanaimo doesn't have a central business district. It's not Toronto or Victoria or Vancouver, wherever these huge amounts of people come down. You have a whole series of small ones, so it really lends itself naturally to a different form of geometry for growth. So those two go together. With respect to the statement around that there is plenty of that. The concerns that we had was that they're misaligned with where the growth is going, which is why I'm focusing on the redevelopment. And if you look through that land use plan, you will find that many of the areas that right now are single family are all being planned for redevelopment, and that's where that goes. In Collier's plan also, they included Ocean View Terrace. Ocean View Terrace is gone. There's no more residential. That's all gone to industrial. And they had a number of other again, VIU, the D&D lands, the lands that are between opposite Northfield that are now slated for light industrial. Those were considered in their evaluation. So the concerns that we had when we first looked at it was, yes, the total number is, but the growth is not being located on those areas for housing. They're been taken out in many areas. The Ocean View Terrace, the Sandstone, and one of those sites accounted for almost 50% of the total amount of area that they had calculated for easy growth. So a bunch of that is not in the process anymore. So I haven't read that current and looked at their accounting, but that was our conclusion when we started looking through that process and why we became concerned.
and prior to your coming here, I did a bit of research, and I was looking at density and that's people per kilometer, and I look at Victoria at 4,700 people per kilometer, Surrey at 1,700, 1,800, Burnaby at 2,600, Vancouver at 5,800, Saanich, mostly farmland, at 1,136, and Nanaimo at 1,104. So we're literally half of what everyone else is almost. And so to me, that tells me that we do have the land to build on, and it will be requiring redevelopment of existing lands. And I noticed that these cities have done it. So I would just assume, it would be the assumed is that we should be doing it too. I really am not keen on the idea of expanding our boundaries when we have such a low density of population. And I fully understand it's much easier and cheaper to develop empty space than it is to redevelop existing houses. But I think that's what we need to do, honestly, from my point of view. And I would certainly be willing to, any way we can help the business community redevelop what we already have, I'd be all up for. But I'm not really keen on making our city any bigger than it is now. Thanks.
If I may, through your worship, one of the challenges you face here in Nanaimo is the age of the housing. So the redevelopment of the area is absolutely the way to go, but we pretty much never buy houses that are built in the 1980s or younger and knock them down. So the challenges that you have here is that those houses were built and they're going to stay that way for quite a while before anyone is going to go in and start taking out Hammond Bay, taking out all of those areas. They're going to be there for a very long time, and your low densities are because of that original pattern that are still with us and will be with us for a long time. So some of those cities that you mentioned, they have been, Vancouver, certainly in central Vancouver, a huge amount of density has gone in. They ran out of land a very long time ago. Their market economics allow them to do some phenomenally large projects, and so they're achieving much, much higher densities. It'll be a while here. Our market economics don't support a lot of that. So densification, and that is exactly what I showed you there, was townhouses and 6 stories is exactly the infill, and I think everybody's fully supportive of it. The caution that we're offering is that it takes a long time to do that. It's very expensive. It's time consuming, public hearings for all of these things. And you demolish a lot of existing housing while you're doing it and having to rehouse those people as well. So it's not to say don't do it. It's to say that be cautious about the implications of the housing supply you can actually bring on by doing that way in the face of a housing crisis right now.
And one other point, Your Worship, is I believe our average over the last number of years of housing starts is around 1,100 a year. So we're kind of already covering it, right? And I just, on honesty, this kind of looks like a doom and gloom thing, right? But I think we're doing better than that. Thanks.
Very good.
Thank you. I think we'll conclude that debate, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks, Mark, for the presentation. And just say I agree much with your premises, but I think we differ on conclusions. But I was just wondering if it would be possible to get some of the information you've presented. You mentioned research, and I just highlight, picking up where Councillor Bonner left off, that 2019 and 2020 saw 60% permitted as multifamily. So I think that was in line with sort of the numbers that you had projected. But our 5-year average is 1,088 residential units per year with and this is fresh off this morning. 2022 is 821 already, with 80% being multifamily. So I would love to be able to sort of compare that, the OCP, and with the research, if it's not just a PowerPoint that you've done. And I'm aware that we're only doing first and second reading, but I'm just wondering if you're able to provide that to us.
The numbers, thank you, through your worship, the numbers that I was using were out of the Collier's report in terms of what they were projecting that was needed and what they were projecting in terms of supply. I did not go into the specifics of how many have been coming on at each side, each year in that regard. Yeah, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you to better understand, if you want to follow up with me afterwards, understand sort of.
Okay, so you didn't do any projections though, based on what we're building? That's
not based on what you're building now, no.
Okay, thanks.
And Councillor Armstrong.
Sorry, this brought one more thing to my mind. When we're talking about when you're looking at housing needed for the economy, like just about everything we're talking about right now is more for people that are past level entry works. Like, most of the condos here you can't afford if you're level entry. How would you look at us addressing that issue? Because we're seeing, no matter where you go in this community, jobs for hire, jobs wanted, hiring. But what we hear from a lot of the people is there's no place for them to live because they can't afford $2,000 for a 2-bedroom or $1,500 for a 1-bedroom.
Through your worship, Yeah, the affordability factor comes through two ways. One is overbuilding. You just simply build till the banks stop lending till you build. It's a full out go. The economists call it the vacancy chain. You build, all new product is always the most expensive because it's new, and it just adds supply. All supply helps in some form. To bring the prices down, the cost of everything is the cost of everything. It doesn't change. Land is the cost of land. Rebar is the cost of rebar. 2x4s, drywallers. So really, the only way to bring down the cost of housing is subsidies. The public has to put funding into it to reduce the costs of those things, to bring them down, and then manage that. It's really, once these things get up this expensive, there's really very few. The only market mechanism is to flood the market with housing, to do something like that.
Or higher interest rates, which we've seen.
And we're seeing
started to drop it down and put supply.
That's right. We're starting to see a leveling off from the craziness. A lot of people moved money out of other investments, equity houses, stocks, bonds, and moved them into the housing market. The deep challenge we have is that the rental vacancy rate is still sub 1% and has been there for quite a while. What that means is we now have expensive housing, so a generation that normally would have moved in out of rental into ownership isn't, because they can't afford to get into it. So we have sort of like two generations of renters stuck in the same housing stock, and that's why we have such low supply of rental housing. And the prices go up, which then attracts a whole lot more people who should not be investing in this. This should not be what they do. Their money should be in the market. It should be in other areas. But they come in here because it looks, as per, well, your worship talked about 30% increase in land value here in the last year. That's pretty attractive. Folks will go deep into debt and play some pretty dangerous games if they think they're going to get a 30% return in 1 year, even if they're bad landlords, even if they don't care. This is what happens. So everybody in my world is all just rapidly have been calling a long time for an increase in the housing, in the interest rates. It's good policy for every other sector. It's crack cocaine for real estate, and it causes huge damage to our cities when this happens, because it takes so hard, and a lot of people get their wealth written down on the way back down again.
Thank you, Mr. Holland.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holland. Mr. Delves, appreciate the presentation tonight. Committee minutes, simply for receipt. I'd ask for a motion for adoption. Councillor Armstrong. Moving adoption of the consent items. Thank you. You're rolling along here tonight. Seconded Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We now have a delegation unrelated to agenda items. John Horn. Ah, very good. Double the intelligence for the same price.
All right. Your Worship, members of council, my name is Susan Clift, and I'm here this evening with my colleague, John Horn. We're both here tonight representing the Nanaimo Region John Howard Society. We want to take this opportunity to share with you what benefits your investments with us have yielded. Now, you may recognize us both as former City of Nanaimo staff. I believe this is the first time either one of us has been back here in front of council in another capacity other than staffs. For some reason, we just can't seem to stay away. As I said, my name's Susan Clift, and I've had a 35-year career as a municipal engineer, the City of Vancouver. I worked with Mark Holland. He's gone now, but he was an ex-colleague. District of North Van, City of Colwood, and of course, the City of Nanaimo. I was here for 2 years as your Director of Engineering and Public Works. I joined the John Howard Society board in 2016, and I have been its president for close to 4 years now. John Horn has been the executive director of the Nanaimo Region John Howard Society for just over a year, and his professional history includes an extensive background in the social services, 13 years experience as your social planner at the City of Nanaimo, followed by executive director of the Cowichan Housing Association. A lifelong resident of Nanaimo, and he has strong relationships with our funders, which are government funding, by the way, for the most part, and a strong relationship with social agencies working in the Mid-Island. and with the broader community in Nanaimo. Now, John is now going to speak about the work we've been doing and to thank you for your assistance with our association.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horn.
I think this thing changes the slides, does it? Is there a...
I'll be indulgent with the allotted time while you sort out your technical
thank you.
difficulties.
Pressing the wrong button. Apparently not. Thank you. Cheers. So, just to say that there's a few things that you guys provide funding to us for. We just wanted to come and say thank you for that and give you a little bit of a snippet of what we do with your money and how we invest it. So this is the laundry list of things that we cover. So I'll just roll through that and give you a little bit of a taste of each one of them. So you make a contribution to the rent bank of about $90,000. So far in the rent bank, we've loaned out about $87,000. We get funding from the province for that as well. And so we've made 70 loans and impacted about 150 people. That includes all the family members, etc. And our repayment rate, as you see, is about 57%. So we're working on driving that number up, but we're not a commercial bank. What we do is we're at that cutting edge of those folks that Mark referenced earlier who really struggle to pay the rents in this community. So the rent bank piece is really helpful for that. We loan low interest rates, 2 years to pay it back, and we're not as mean as the bankers about demanding our money. So it's a good project, and thank you for your contribution to that. The next thing we do is, of course, restorative justice. And you guys have been contributing that for quite a long time, I think since 2014. So what I would say, 2004, sorry. What I would mention is that there's the youth, the adult, the alternative measures, there's the community work service orders, and our youth mentoring program. Probably the issue that most germane to yourselves is that of graffiti, and a number of our restorative justices are about graffiti that lands up in the community. I will mention that we have been receiving money funding of about $50,000 a year from yourselves since 2004, and we have not asked for a raise in 18 years, just noting that. 18 years without a raise. We have the Supportive Housing Project, which will support the city's initiative to address homelessness in our city centre and other areas, and as you know, you've provided the land and the building for that, so we'll be moving forward on that as soon as they demolish the building and get the construction completed, and we hope to see that up and running in February, March, sometime like that. We also have the Urban Cleanup Project and the Parks and Trails Project. That has a nice piece to it because we take individuals who are street involved, who have had a long history of involvement with substance use in the criminal justice system, and we bring them back into the world of work and contribution to the community through the Urban Cleanup and Parks and Trails programs. And not only do we try to make the city cleaner and safer for everyone to be in, but we do the restorative justice component where we bring people back into the fold of the community and to a place where they're working and contributing as contributing members to the community. So that's one we're really proud of, and we do a lot of work in the downtown core on, and hopefully you notice that difference. Lastly, of course, you give us property tax exemptions. We don't ever forget that, and we do appreciate that. We know that's a big number for you guys, and we recognize that it helps our bottom line and helps us to be more sustainable. So that's really all the areas that we cover, and I think what I do is pass on to my board chair to give you a little final slide. So, and then, of course, we're free to answer any questions
Thank you.
have as well as that. So, last, Susan, I think
I'm letting you run a bit over
We have
time
21
tonight,
seconds.
so
21 seconds.
make the pitch sweet and short, please.
The Nanaimo Region John Howard Society has been in operation here in this town for 64 years. We started off with a criminal justice focus, but have now grown in our approach. We still have a public safety lens, but we are about helping our clients through sobriety and wellness integrate back into the community. We find a way for our clients to safely re-enter and contribute to society. We'd like to say we are tough on the root causes of crime. With revenue of over $3.7 million in our last fiscal year, sourced from federal, provincial, municipal governments, as well as private donations, we offer a wide range of services: dental clinic, veterinary services, restorative justice, addiction recovery centers inside and outside the Nanaimo Correctional Center, shared housing for those exiting the recovery facilities, housing supports like the rent bank, assistance with finding employment after incarceration or addiction recovery, or both. And as you've heard, in the near future, we'll be operating the new supportive recovery housing about to be constructed at Prideaux and Fitzwilliam. It's a great example of how municipal and provincial governments, along with the not-for-profit sector, can achieve more together than separately. Your Worship, members of Council, we thank you for your continued support. We look forward to working on future projects of joint interest through the strategic alignment of our resources.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Turley.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all your work. I think the Restorative Justice Program is amazing. In your work that you're doing with the therapeutic communities in Guthrie as well. Do you see this program possibly expanding? And if so, what would you need from the city to see it expand?
So I think we do see expanding those areas where we're providing both supportive recovery and helping people transition out of criminal-based lifestyles and into more normative community lifestyles. So we want to provide more community resources for those folks and for those who recently and regularly encounter the criminal justice system. What we would need from the municipality probably is support around the rezoning. We all know that social housing projects, and particularly projects that support those who are released from incarceration, aren't very popular with neighborhoods. So there are times when we will need your support to get the correct zoning in order to do projects. I think that's one of the biggest pieces. And then secondly, your support for advocacy to both provincial and federal governments, so you have a lot of clout when it comes to those doors and you can open those doors for us. So we would appreciate your advocacy as well, because the problems that you wish to solve are the problems we wish to solve.
And just to follow up on that, if I may, is that, Mr. Eby has announced, Mr. Lepard, and I can't remember her name, are going to do a study on the chronic offenders. Through your programs, do you see a lot of repeat offenders?
Certainly. Within the Nanaimo Correctional Center program, the Guthrie Therapeutic Community, the vast bulk of people who come through that program are repeat offenders and prolific offenders as well. That's a target group we're very familiar with and have been working with for decades. We see our substance use recovery program as being a key component of that work, and we also see that our experience in working with the criminal justice system is also a big piece. So all told, we see ourselves as being an entity that can make a big contribution to the reduction of those offensive or those offending patterns, So our goal would be to take those individuals who are really problematic in our community in terms of the number of offenses and work with them through both substance reduction, substance use reduction, and sobriety, wellness, the return to employment, all those pieces we do now. We'd like to bring that to bear on the repeat and prolific offenders issue, which is bedeviling all the communities in our country, So that's something where we want to do future work on, and we would happily partner with the municipality. I know that you guys have a role in managing those pieces, and we'd want to be supportive of that as well.
And would it be fair to say that there's not many other programs out there that are supporting these people once they get out of the prison system?
That's correct. And what we see is that if you do invest in people a little bit post-release from incarceration, you get a lot better results. They're not falling back into the crime patterns. And so often the criminal justice system sort of ends at the jail door when they exit the system, and then they're expected to be just in the community somehow and make a go of it, So we see that that's not really a successful approach, and the system recognizes that too. So we want to be those people who are standing there when those prison doors open and you're released into the community, that we have a place for you to live and a way for you to conduct your life that reduces or eliminates your offending patterns.
Thank you very much, and I do know from my previous life that your programs have made a difference in a lot of people's lives, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Really appreciate the work that you're doing in the community. I know several individuals that have been, through the criminal justice system and are out in the community, and a couple times have lost housing because of just increased rents, and they were able to go to the John Howard Society and get help with securing housing. And I know that really does keep our community safe, because I know these individuals, once they've lost their housing and get really depressed and are on the streets, once they start using, they can do 7, 8, 9, 10 B&Es in one night, and we get huge spikes in the community, and and that really creates a sense of unsafety. And so by being able to have that connection to the John Howard Society, go and get support, get into housing, a lot sooner, it avoids that cycle that is really a huge detriment. So thank you for keeping our community safe, and really hope that you're feeling well supported in the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. 1,000 years ago, when the earth was still cooling, I articled at a firm called Strongatharm Curry and Company, and Edward Dury Strongatharm was one of the, I think it's fair to say, the founders of John Howard in this community, and acquainted me with the work of John Howard and Elizabeth Fry Society. And I just want to say, and Councillor Armstrong has a lot of experience in this area, you should take great pride in the work you've done and accomplished and continue to do. It has saved a lot of people from lives of absolute misery and potential victims of their continued criminal activity if they hadn't found a path to a better life through the work of John Howard. So thank you very much, and what you're doing is appreciated, and thank you for also taking on 285 Prideaux. Very good, thank you. The next item, reports. We have City Plan Bylaw 2022, number 6600, first and second reading. Mr. Lindsay, good evening.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. It's certainly our pleasure to be here this evening. Introduce the official community plan, city plan, for consideration of first and second reading. But also I would note that the first three items under your reports, A, B, and C, are all related to this journey or this process that we've been on for the last couple of years. And I'm going to turn it over here initially to Ms. Bhopal Singh just to walk you through a little bit of the history on the Reimagine process and how we've got to where we are today with the draft city plan. But I just wanted to take a moment before I do and just and thank her publicly and her team, along with Lanark, and I think Ms. Zielinski, who I believe is on the line with us this evening, who have certainly taken a lot on their shoulders in the last couple of years, and I'm really proud of the work that this team's delivered. A team that involves people from across the organization, but very happy. I'll be honest, I don't think to say that this process was not without its curveballs, for sure. I don't think when we started this process 2 years ago that anybody predicted a worldwide pandemic when you were just about to launch the most significant public engagement process the city's ever done. So I really want to recognize the team. They adjusted, they carried on, they adapted. We still were able to reach out to a significant number of people. And over the last few months, that has continued. And I know you've the draft plan, I know council knows this, but it was released to the community on February 28th. And since that time, we've literally had hundreds of inputs from neighborhood associations, from committees, from other stakeholder groups, from other government to government, through other government to government relations. All of those considerations have been taken into account, considered by the team, transparently communicated back to the community about how those inputs are being considered and how they were reflected in the new plan. So many very long weekends and long evenings over the last couple of months to get us here, but very proud of the work that this team's done. And on that note, I'll turn it over to Ms. Bhopal Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay, and Ms. Bhopal Singh. Before you forget, I'm going to do something really unusual. I'm going to say the thank you right off the bat and be simple and very short and sweet. Everything that Mr. Lindsay has had to say about you and the team and everyone who's worked in this, if this were a court of appeal, we'd simply say we all concur. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I wish you could imagine my voice as 1,000 people, including the staff. So if you get bored, just imagine many voices, including those to my left and right. So without further ado, I'm going to spend roughly about 10 minutes, no more, giving you an overview, partly for yourselves, partly for community members who are watching, hopefully not for the first time. So today, I'm just going to, bear with me while I get the clicker working. There, perfect. So here's the rundown of what I'm going to go over today. A quick overview of the process. I know you're all familiar with it, but a little reminder of what we've heard from our community, what's changed since the February 28th draft, based on what you endorsed on May 16th, and then a quick overview of what are some of the highlights of what's changed and what's been strengthened between our current OCP and the City Plan 2022 bylaw. And then one slide or two on the adoption process and our next steps. So this is where we're at the end of phases 1, 2, and 3. We've been developing plans, and we now have a solid draft in front of you, building on the February 28th and incorporating the changes that Council endorsed. Now, one of the most significant parts of this process is we really took to heart Council's direction in the terms of reference to look back at the work of the Community Engagement Task Force. We used a platform called Get Involved Nanaimo, and Reimagine Nanaimo was our testing project for the use of this platform. And we also made strong use of social capital and our networks. We're grateful to VIU, to the profs who had us in their classrooms, to School District 68, who really helped us connect with families and children. And the cumulative, like we've literally heard from thousands of individuals. We use not only regular surveys online, we use Statistically Valid to just check in that we were getting the representation across our neighborhoods, north and south and central to the city, our demographics, and trying to readjust in between. You heard from Janet Zielinski that in phase 3, that our close to 1,000 survey responses at this stage in the process, where people gave literally hours of time to give us feedback, was, you know, she unabashedly said we had certainly exceeded by 3 times in some cases similar sized cities with their OCPs in the last 2 years. And so our community has really stood up and told us what they wanted and confirmed that the direction we're going in with this draft that they saw on February 28th is the direction that they want to see. So a smattering of some of the pictures and images, and a thanks to each and every one of you who helped us reach out to the wider community. So based on between February 28th and that draft in 2022, we got our most experienced staff member, who you see before you, to review the plan. And just to give you a sense of how dedicated our staff are, this is one of our staff members' children, and she woke up one morning on a weekend to find her engaged in the city plan. And I thought, what better way can you see a document being accessible when this little person who is yet to read has taken her mom's copy of the plan and is reviewing it. And I think Mr. Harding will be very pleased that she studied and helped review the Parks, Recreation, Culture, and Wellness piece quite thoroughly. So on to, we took your recommended input on May 16th, and you'll see that embedded in the plan. This also involved reducing the plan by some 50 pages in terms of cleaning up graphics that perhaps weren't needed and other text, restructuring it, making sure there was a solid introduction, bringing forward community safety to the front of Goal 3 to reflect the emphasis of what we heard from the community and council, and bringing forward a separate executive summary that will be online soon, along with a backgrounder and glossary. The refinements have been tested out for readability, and then in addition, there's also been housekeeping edits based on your feedback around language, and then the basics like catching typos and things like that. So one of the things to emphasize is that while we started off with an OCP review, through your direction, we took a strategic plan review. And so while the intention was to amalgamate one or more plans, we were able to integrate 6+ plans. So in terms of efficiency and process and not tiring out our community with engagement, we did a one-stop engagement that informed all these different components and allowed us to weave together one draft city plan that moves well beyond a standard official community plan. And I'm just pausing as the clicker, I'm not sure, there we go. So one of the things I want to emphasize here is that this plan improves and coordinates land use. There were many good things about the 2008 OCP that took time to come to fruition. So for example, the idea of corridors was introduced in the 2008 OCP. We're still keeping that concept. We're focusing on urban centers with the acknowledgement that downtown is our primary. This was supported by our community and linked by these mobility corridors. We also are looking at the majority of growth being absorbed in these centers, and also secondarily the mobility corridors in between. And then acknowledging that the community in the neighborhoods want to see more gentle infill, they're certainly not the focus of the majority of the growth in the next 25 years. And so respecting that, the amount of growth intended to be absorbed in the neighborhoods is very modest and gentle. So this plan also reinforces our commitment to be the regional growth center for the regional district of Nanaimo. It's part of the regional growth strategy. By maintaining and increasing land within the urban containment boundary, we have corrected and refined different things that, for example, the ocean view lands, a reduction by Sandstone as they wish to expand more their industrial and commercial. And all of these elements help us strengthen our existing urban centers and building for a more efficient and what I would call not only sustainable, but a sensible approach from an asset management, a fiscal responsibility. And so those are some important elements that we're building on through this plan. The other thing about the document itself is it's intended to be a more efficient way for community members to understand what's expected and where their vision is. So instead of bouncing across several plans, whether it's the Parks, Recreational Culture Plan or OCP or our transportation plan, it's now in one document. And that also makes it an easier framework for our development community to work with, as well as our staff. And so we provided a clear visual framework so that it speaks to people from all levels, those who want to get technical and down into the depths of policies, and those for whom graphics really speak and communicate. And we found that quite effective with our high schoolers that we were working with, as well as actually testing things out with a few people with different learning abilities. So the important thing about this plan too is connecting that land use and mobility. And I've been waiting to use the sign down below, which says Plan Engineering Way. And in a spirit of great collaboration, Jamie Rose, who's one of our colleagues, who Bill Sims knows very well, had this put up in the transition zone between planning and engineering. We are neighbors, and through the planning process of Reimagine, he put this up one day, and I thought, what a wonderful way of showing the integration across departments. And one of the pieces around aligning transportation and mobility, it really helps address several council's goals and the communities. So the desire to have more affordable housing where people don't have to afford a car, and they can be connected by transit, aligning transit exchanges with the urban centers, making sure that we also have our trail network and all our different forms of mobility through parks, recreation, and culture, aligned with our transportation, active transportation planning. That's all been done through this plan. So this plan, here's the outline of the different goals and the frameworks. It addresses all of those different pieces that we've got there about the environment, health and well-being, livability, reconciliation, inclusion, and economic resilience. So the things you tasked us with in our terms of reference, we have done our utmost to achieve and integrate. So this streamlines one document that integrates future land use, amenities, and services, and we cannot emphasize enough that our thought behind these processes considered things like asset management and what was practical. The other important piece is we've taken the development permit area guidelines and moved them into the zoning bylaw, and this is in keeping with other municipalities around us. It's a more effective way of working with the development community in terms of their expectations around that process. And so tonight, later on, you'll get a presentation around the bylaw, the zoning bylaw change to put the actual guidelines into the zoning bylaw. But this document, the city plan, establishes the development permits, but the regulations will now be in the zoning bylaw if you accept them that way. So 2022, the city plan strengthens climate resilience and adaptation. And I think there's a typo there, but let's quickly go on from that. Environmental protection, support for circular economies, and resets the required GHG targets that we have to have through the Local Government Act. It reframes and integrates the parks, recreation, and culture to reflect wellness, accessibility, and inclusion. There's a strong focus on health, equity, and community engagement. Reconciliation is woven throughout the document. And parks, recreation, and culture is reframed. Oh, I think these images are repeated. There we go. The other piece is this strong focus on economic integration and the look at the development of strong employment centers. And that was another piece as we were looking at where the urban centers should be. And the support, again, as I mentioned, for the city's role as a regional growth center. So in terms of next steps, where we're at right now is in the bylaw adoption process. We're here for council to consider first and second reading in the bylaw. Should you do that, the next step would be for us to look at doing formal referrals to certain agencies that we're required to and others that we've identified through the engagement plan. And should council so direct us today, schedule a public hearing looking at June 22nd. And then should council then proceed from there, looking at a third and fourth reading and adoption on July 4th. So with the Local Government Act, and I think you're all very familiar with this, but for maybe our viewers at home, each bylaw reading with an official community plan, which this will be adopted under, the Local Government Act requires an affirmative vote of the majority of all of council, so that means 5 or more. The city has to consider this in conjunction with its financial plan and any applicable waste management plans. And as I've mentioned, this is something that's been done throughout the process and is actually the results of the land use plan and policies are related to those components. But again, we will be doing that as a quick review through this process. We have to refer it to the Agricultural Land Commission, and then of course we're required to hold a public hearing after first and before third reading. So you can give first and second and then proceed to that, and then follow all the relevant public hearing procedures. And you can give third and final reading of an OCP at the same meeting. So just a few things for consideration for those watching at home and also for yourselves. And that is the end of my presentation, and we'd collectively be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bhopal-Singh. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Ms. Bhopal-Singh or any other staff member that has knowledge of this, and that is the issue of abandoned mine workings hazard. I see on the attached Schedule 9, attached from, I don't even see, anyways, one of these attachments. There's quite a large area throughout the city in different spots of coal mine risk. Now, does that mean there actually are coal mines under there, or there's a potential that we don't know but possibly could be?
Okay, through the chair, I'm going to ask for Mr. Holmes' help on this. However, we had a good consultant by the name of Carl Miller who took a look at what we know of coal mines and coal mine risk, and based on those maps, created this risk or heat map, what I would call it. Mr. Holmes, I don't know if you've got any more to share, or Mr. Sims, I beg your pardon.
Your Worship, I can take some of that. And the coal mine workings that you see in the mapping are an aggregate of all of, as Ms. Bhopal-Singh mentioned, an aggregate of all of the information that we know from various bits of research over many, many years. And we're trying to be careful not to show it too exactly because, but it's showing where we need to take precautions if they're nearby, if certain properties are nearby to underlying coal mines. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I have a question for a later presentation on that, but I'll wait till then for that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just say I'm excited to see this going to public hearing. Long process, and I think one of the things that I'm really pleased about, and I'll reserve, big judgment, but we got a lot of input, but we also made changes as a result of that input, and I think that was really important. And so I just want to flag that as a personal highlight for me of this entire process. And like I said, I'm curious to hear what the community says at the public hearing.
Thank you, and Councillor Armstrong.
Oh, thank you. I've shared before, and I'll share again. I've got a lot of concerns about the OCP review. Nothing against staff. I've searched through all sorts of OCP reviews and never saw ever council being a steering committee in any of them. It was all community, which has always been a concern I've had, that this has been council-driven, not community-driven. My second concern I have is that Minister Eby has said that they will be looking at changes to the legislation around zoning. So I think that's going to have a huge impact on our OCP, so I'm concerned about that, how that's going to go forward. And one of my other big concerns, and I've said it numerous times, nowhere do we really actually have an actual own bullet point for community safety, which is what we hear the most about from our constituents. It was actually higher than the environment when you did your surveys and economics. And we don't have that in our own bullet point. We've got green economy, we've got all that, but we don't have, I would like a separate thing. Very important to me. It's over 30% of our budget, yet nowhere does it have its own place in any of our strategic plans, nor in our OCP. So thank you, but I will be voting in favor of it going to public hearing after talking to other councillors. I think that's a place it needs to go. And to those that have been emailing and talking to myself and others, this is your opportunity to make sure you come out, because if you don't, your voice won't be heard. So for those that are negative towards it or positive, you really have to either email us or make sure you come to the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Gesselbrock?
I was just looking to move the recommendation that the plan pass first reading.
Moving the first motion, seconded by Councillor Hemmons. Not seeing any discussion on that. All those in favor? Sorry? Well, actually, there's the motion first, then we move to a bylaw. Correct, Ms. Robertson?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I believe Councillor Gesselbrock has moved motion number 1 as opposed to that we pass first reading, correct? That was the motion you were moving, Councillor?
Councillor Gesselbrock, were you moving the motion, or the first one, or were you actually looking to move the motion to pass first reading?
So there is a recommendation that councils consider the consultation opportunities. Does that require its own motion?
Yes.
That's the first motion.
Okay.
That's what I thought you were moving. Correct?
Yeah, I'm moving to get to the first, passing the first reading, but if that needs to come,
that's Councillor Thorpe.
If that needs to come to the, okay. So
we're all agreed. We're moving the first.
I'll move that one then, if that's the first stage of the
Thank you.
process. So the council has considered the consultation opportunities provided during the development of the plan, City Plan 2022, and has determined that those opportunities are appropriate and satisfy the requirements of Section 475 in the Local Government Act.
And we have a seconder in Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you very much. Now, Councillor Thorpe, the privilege of being acting mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. My microphone is on.
Sorry, you have to, there we are.
Oh, sorry, my
There we
fault.
are.
Thank you. I will move that City Plan Bylaw 2022, number 6600, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. I will move that City Plan Bylaw 2022, number 6600, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank staff and also thank the community for the work that they've done over this long period of time. Sorry about the pandemic, but everyone else had to deal with it too. So I think we've done a yo person's job getting this to where it is now. This is not part and parcel of many things that we've been able to accomplish in our term so far, and this is by far at the pinnacle of it. And I, unlike Councillor Armstrong, I believe this was council-led and community-driven. So I just wanted to point my thing as I think we've done it well. I look forward to the accolades coming in from all the other cities that wish they were doing as well as we are. So thanks very much.
Well said, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks, Your Worship. I want to comment that I think that this plan sets a good foundation for Nanaimo, for a safe and livable city. I think it, sets a foundation that, meet our residents' needs and also take care of the environment. I think it's been a result of a significant amount of public engagement, and I know staff have worked really hard during some challenging conditions to get the word out and get feedback from the community. I also know that this plan has gathered significant attention from municipalities across the country. Just looking at its impressive ability to tie together, all the different elements that makes cities healthy and thrive. So I know that staff have been working incredibly hard to keep to some pretty tight timelines to keep this project on track. And so I look forward to getting this to public hearing and hearing a bit more from the community before we move to the next steps of completing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I first of all want to add to those thanking and acknowledging Ms. Bhopal Singh and staff. Absolutely respect the work that you have done and appreciate it very much. This has been a huge project, as you've indicated, combining 6 or more major city plans into one. And with that amount of information and that amount of points to debate, I'm sure there's something in there that not everybody will agree with. And I have to honestly say that I do have some concerns and some reservations, and I've expressed them before. I have concerns over the overall framework that was used, some of the wording of the questions in the surveys, some of the language, some of the direction which the document indicates. I'm probably in the minority there, and maybe those won't end up being that important in the bigger picture. But I do have those reservations. I also recognize, however, the extent of community involvement that we've had in the process in gathering information. I do think that Council has been too active in driving it. I tend to agree with Councillor Armstrong on that point. But we have had unprecedented public response. So that makes me feel a bit better. And I will echo Councillor Armstrong's comment about people coming out to the public forum or expressing their opinions as we deal with it. And I'm certainly willing to support moving it to that step. So thank you again for your work.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody, to all the staff, and to our community. My experience, as I've been involved before in OCPs, is that there was extensive engagement this time. I think to have over 13,000 people responding is 13% of our city is tremendous. And as for listening to community safety and security, it is one of our goals. We did listen to citizens. We did make amendments. One of our desired outcomes is a high degree of perceived and actual public safety and security where all people can equitably live, work, play, create, and learn. And I believe that this is something that is on our council lens, is creating safety for our city, but this is a 50-year plan. And I'm happy to see the OCP integrating all our other plans into one document, and just a huge thank you.
This process is for me akin to a budget. I don't think anyone ever passes a budget in any body of any size, whether it's a local society or a municipal council or a provincial legislature or a federal parliament, without thinking there might be a few things I'd love to change or things that we should have given different priority to. There'll always be those concerns. But you do have to step back at the end of the day and make a decision. Are you going to support it or are you not going to support it? For me, this is an easy choice. I think this reflects, as Ms. Bhopal Singh has said, the most significant participation by the community in a process akin to this process as well in the history of Nanaimo. Perhaps it might have been exceeded at the point when we had only a couple of thousand citizens, maybe. Maybe it was exceeded in terms of participation, but I doubt it. Much less was expected of government in those days. We expect a great deal from government now. Mr. Rudolph pointed out in reference, I think a year or two ago when he read an interesting piece, there are two kinds of citizens. There are two kinds of people. There are citizens and taxpayers. The taxpayers tend to see this as a transactional operation. I pay my taxes, I deserve my services, and if you don't deliver, well, I'm not happy. And then there are citizens who wish to step forward and participate. And the citizenry, and hopefully many of the taxpayers as well this time around, stepped forward and participated. I think they did. I agree with Councillor Gesselbrock's comments about this being, I think, a model for other communities that are engaging or about to engage in this process. Councillor Martman wisely pointed out that we did respect the concerns of the community, extremely legitimate concerns around public safety. As Councillor Hemmond said, we have made a lot of changes to this. Councillor Thorpe's right. We're not perfect. There are reservations around it. But all we're doing tonight, and I say all, although it is significant, is putting this now back out to the public for a public hearing, essentially. And I think that is obviously what has to be legally done. It will give people an opportunity. And quite candidly, they have that opportunity. And if they choose not to participate, it ill behooves them after, when presumably this may well pass, to then criticize. That is the joy of democracy. You have the right to speak and be heard. You also have the opportunity to influence the process. And I hope that people will take advantage of that. If they choose not to, then let them, like the conclusion of a traditional wedding ceremony, forever hold their peace, or at least until the next official community plan. All those in favor of second reading? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that Council considers City Plan Bylaw 2022, number 6600, in conjunction with the City of Nanaimo's financial plan. Considers City Plan Bylaw 2022, number 6600, in conjunction with the Regional District of Nanaimo Liquid Waste Management Plan 2014 and Regional Solid Waste Management Plan 2018. Direct staff to refer City Plan Bylaw 2022, number 6600, to the Agricultural Land Commission for comment, and direct staff to arrange a public hearing.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Development Approval Information Bylaw. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. As I mentioned, the next two items are related to city plan and more procedural in nature, and I think we've touched on both of these items, at least somewhat touched on them in your previous GPC meetings, but I'll ask Mr. Holm just to introduce the reports briefly.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. As Mr. Lindsay mentioned, this item is largely an administrative item, and it's actually a bylaw that is city plan supporting in nature. The proposal here is for a development approval information bylaw, proposed bylaw 2022 number 7346. And this is being introduced concurrently with the new city plan, the draft OCP that's just been given readings by council. And the idea of this bylaw is to support implementation of OCP objectives for new development, and that's achieved through outlining the information requirements for development approval information to address potential impacts from development on the community and the environment and infrastructure. So this bylaw proposes or identifies and clarifies the scope and substance of information that may be required in relation to a zoning bylaw amendment, development permit application, or a temporary use permit application. And the bylaw ensures that the impacts on development to the community are appropriately considered, and that the development approval, through the development approval process, and provides clear direction and transparency regarding the information that's required to support consideration of development approvals. Thanks. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Holm. This is where I wanted to ask my question about the building above potential mining operations. And I'm reading from this map from the previous discussion that just the areas in the Mulvey pink would be areas where a drill would be required. Is that accurate?
Oh, pardon me, did I hear where a drill or a report would be required?
I guess a report. I'm assuming they'd have to do some sort of investigation.
Yeah, not through your worship. Not necessarily would excavation or drilling be required, but so the area in pink, you're referring to Schedule 9, I believe it is, of the city plan.
Yep.
So those are areas that are based on historical records and research that have known underground mine workings. Largely our records are from provincial records, basically, consolidated. And as was mentioned, I think previously, we've had a consultant that's well experienced in this type of work review the records that we have and help us put this information together. These are records that the city currently has access to, although they're not currently they're not in a form that's very transparent or available to the public. So this exercise actually helps improve the transparency of those records and makes that information available. There will be additional information on the nature of the workings that we'll be able to provide to a geotechnical engineer that would be supporting development approval in that area. It really, what's proposed here doesn't waver greatly, doesn't change greatly the current framework for development approval that's in place for development that's occurring over abandoned mine workings. It increases transparency. It increases the information available to the public as well. The consultant that assisted us with this did an assessment of the workings based on the records that we have, the depth of the workings, the nature of the extraction, the type of work that was done, and did a risk assessment to help actually inform and refine the work that somebody might have to do when developing in those areas. And there are, if you read, we'll talk about that with the next item, but a development permit area is also proposed in relation to abandoned mine hazards. And there are many exemptions built into the development permit area that basically support the current approach that the city takes, that has taken for decades to address the potential hazard to a development in those areas. So that's through the building permit process or through the subdivision process. Currently, staff evaluate, through the provision of reports, evaluate the potential impact and recommendations to address the potential impact of mine working hazards. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, just because a property is within this pink zone doesn't mean that they have to provide a report. It would be based on the likelihood of whether there is workings beneath there or not?
Through your worship, correct. And also it would be triggered by development, and there are exemptions for
Yeah, I saw that.
certain development activities as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question here is sort of along the lines of what Mr. Holland was raising earlier, in the terms of redevelopment of that's going to be required in Nanaimo to bring on the extra population that we're expecting to have. So my question is regarding J, economic and social development. How does that work, and what would trigger a report on the social health of the community in a development permit?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Through your worship, I'll attempt to and look to maybe Mr. Lindsay or others for assistance if needed, but if you need further clarity. So this would depend on the scale of the development, and this would be, for instance, something like the scale of say sandstone or green thumb, for instance, looking at the ability of that development to provide for the economic needs of the community long term, and so we would look to, and it's not completely unusual on larger scale developments to have an economic impact assessment done, and to consider the ability of a development to provide for the social and economic needs of the community going forward.
Mm-hmm. I guess the second part of that is, the first part is, if the city requires this information, who makes that decision, and is it a standard, standard chart, and then you do or you don't, or is it more subjective?
Your Worship, can I just clarify? Mr. Holm might want to jump in, but I just want to make sure, because I think your original question said at development permit stage. I just want to be very clear about the name development's in here, but it's a development approvals information bylaw, which at any stage of development, and this would apply more at a significant, as Mr. Holm mentioned, a significant OCP or rezoning amendment, for example. So if somebody came forward in the future and wanted to do a major change to the OCP, a boundary extension, something along that scale, it would give us the ability, and it's staff that empowers staff to use this bylaw to turn to an applicant and say, here's our authority to ask for this information. But it's largely used I shouldn't say largely, it's used at all types of applications, not just development permits.
Okay, yeah, and that was just me not knowing what the right term was.
No, but I think it's an important point, because at a development permit for form and character, we wouldn't be asking these questions, but at a change of land use, absolutely we would.
You see, okay.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, Councillor Thorpe, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I will move that City of Nanaimo Development Approval Information Bylaw 2022, number 7346, to specify development information requirements, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Councillor Thorpe.
Your Worship, I'll move that City of Nanaimo Development Approval Information Bylaw 2022, number 7346, pass second reading.
Moved, Councillor Martman. Pardon me, seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
And I will move that City of Nanaimo Development Approval Information Bylaw 2022, number 7346, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Appreciated. The next is Development Permit Areas Guidelines, Amendment to Zoning Bylaw. Mr. Lindsay, no, Mr. Holm. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Your Worship. And I won't say too much about this. It was introduced, and I think we had quite a thorough conversation about it at, as a draft amendment bylaw at Governance and Priorities Committee meeting on May 9th. But effectively, this is another administrative piece and city plan supporting in nature. Ms. Bhopal Singh referenced this earlier in her presentation, and what's proposed here is a zoning bylaw amendment to introduce development permit area guidelines into the zoning bylaw. They're supporting development permit areas that are proposed to be designated through city plan. There are 8 development permit areas proposed to be designated through city plan, and this bylaw includes guidelines to guide development permit consideration evaluation in those areas. It also includes exemptions, and the bylaw includes related definitions, and the purpose overall is to to achieve the objectives of city plan, and to also to identify, there's some additional amendments proposed to the zoning bylaw to address some, to ensure that there's consistency between the zoning bylaw and city plan as proposed, including updates to Schedule C, which is the watercourse and environmentally sensitive areas schedule. The watercourse schedule to the zoning bylaw will now correspond to city plan's Schedule 6 regarding watercourse protection mapping. As well, there's a Schedule E proposed to the zoning bylaw, which identifies neighborhood and area plan boundaries that that form and character design guidelines from the neighborhood plans would apply within those areas. That's about all I had to say on this. I'm happy to take questions if you have any, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holm. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have one question. First of all, thanks for this. I think it's great. A subtle thing, but has massive benefits. The one thing I'm wondering is, and I imagine this would be a fairly atypical situation, but if there was a particular development permit guideline that a proponent didn't feel they could meet or did not want to meet, would they be permitted to seek a variance as it's in the zoning bylaw?
This is, through Your Worship, this is, the guidelines would be applied no differently than they currently are. Currently, the guidelines are contained within the official community plan, and they would be applied no differently than they are in the official community plan. So they wouldn't necessarily have to seek a variance. Guidelines are sort of the development permit areas and the guidelines are regulatory in nature, but they're not completely prescriptive. And it's there'd be sort of an evaluation of the balance of compliance with the guidelines, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that zoning amendment bylaw 2022, number 4500.199, to include development permit area guidelines, exemptions, and related definitions in addition to other amendments for consistency with the proposed official community plan, city plan, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
And I will move that zoning amendment bylaw 2022, number 4500.199, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We're now on to development permit application number DP 1219-2498 Rosstown Road. Mr. Holm again.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. And if I could have attachment B to the report brought up on the overhead, that will identify the property in question here. So property on Rosstown Road, you can see outlined in red and hatched on the overhead. The proposal is a development permit application for a reduction to watercourse leaf strip requirement, and this is submitted by Williamson and Associates surveyors on behalf of the property owner. As you can see on the overhead, there's an unnamed stream that crosses the property from the northeast corner to the east and eventually transitioning through adjacent properties towards Rosstown Road. From Rosstown Road, it's actually piped about 200 meters until it reaches a wetland closer to in Northfield Nature Park, closer to Mountain Vista Drive. And if you could bring up, please, attachment D, I'll explain what's proposed here. So the proposal is in support of a subdivision application. A 13-lot subdivision is proposed in the area. The water course effectively functions as a drainage course currently. It's non-fish bearing and has been reviewed by the applicant's qualified environmental professional and has been determined to not be considered a stream as far as provincial regulations, the riparian area protection regulations, or the Water Sustainability Act are concerned. So provincial regulations consider this as a drainage course rather than a water course. The qualified environmental professional has done an assessment of the existing habitat value and has put together a plan to demonstrate how the property can be developed in a manner that actually increases the habitat value. If you could bring up attachment E, please, that would, I'll show you give you a little overview of what's proposed here. So the variance to the drainage course would allow, as I mentioned, a 13-lot subdivision to proceed, and there would be an expansion. You can see a ponded area on the right-hand side of the proposed development there. That's expanded habitat value through a detailed restoration planting plan, as well as a water course, sort of an engineered wetland area that will help address the drainage requirements for the proposed subdivision that will mitigate the peak flows and provide a more moderated drainage flows from the development while improving the habitat value around the proposed water or the wetland area. Currently, the drainage course has approximately 433 square meters of aquatic habitat area. What's proposed there through the redevelopment and subdivision is almost double that at 864 square meters, along with restoration planting and a detailed monitoring and maintenance plan that's proposed by the qualified environmental professional. Overall, the proposal results in an enhancement to the watercourse area as far as habitat value, and staff supports proposed variance as requested. I know the applicant and his consultants are in attendance to answer questions. I don't believe they had a presentation prepared, but they are available to answer questions. I'm also happy to take questions too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holm. Any questions for Mr. Holm? Councillor Gesselbrock?
Yes, thank you. Just a few points of clarification. The water course, I went and walked it today, and there's a little stream. It's the next subdivision over. I think it's been paved over, and below it's covered. But through this lot, there's a stream through with running water, with the actual area where the water is in and the 7.5 meter setback, I think it's roughly, like 2,200 square meters. And the pond that's being proposed, that's in the realm of like 480 square meters, and there's a few other additions, but I don't quite see it adding up to 2,000, and sort of how it looks like there's a net loss of habitat, which I think in our policy it says like we try to do a no net loss. And so although I am hearing that there's an increase in the aquatic habitat, so there's a few things that just aren't adding up in terms of what's being communicated. Thank you.
Did you want me to speak to that?
That'd be great, please. Thank you.
Pardon me?
That'd be great, please.
Okay, sure. Through your worship. So I think looking at the, it's assessing the value of the habitat overall. And I think maybe the applicant's qualified environmental professional, if it's council's desire, can speak to that as well. But as far as the quality of the habitat, the value of the habitat, the area of high value, the habitat area that's of high value is actually increasing, as what's been demonstrated through the proposed restoration plan. So not just the area within the 7.5 meter setback as you've identified is not of comparable value to what's proposed here.
Right, so the land for land that we're gaining to losing, there's definitely a decrease in land, but there's just been a determination that the quality of what exists there is suboptimal, and so what's being restored is going to equal out.
Will be, yes, greater than. Yeah, that's correct.
Because it is considerably less. And I guess, was there, in terms of assessing the quality, was there like an inventory of, the different plants and birds and amphibians and, that of the area completed, just assessing the baseline? Or?
Yes, there was, and the QEP can speak to that if needed.
Sure, yeah, I just didn't see that included in the report, so.
Yeah, there was a summary included, but not the detailed assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gesselbrock. We do have 3 delegations in order: Tyler Hansen, Blair Dewick, and Adam Compton. Gentlemen, do you wish to say anything or just take questions?
We have no presentation to do. We'll just field questions. And I think you're right that what we're doing is improving more so than what was there. And Adam did the plant counts, and so he's our QEP, and he was going to chime in, but I'm not sure where he is at the moment. So he's in Fino, but I don't see him up on the screen.
It's all right, Mr. Dewick. We lost one of our staff earlier tonight. We couldn't get him on either.
And this is Tyler. He can speak to this as well. So this not being a stream, I think it falls under a different ruling than if it was a stream. We had to do a no net loss. That's why Adam came up with the pond idea. We've worked with staff on this to get the shape and the plantings in there too.
I'm not seeing any other questions for the delegation, so...
Oops, sorry, I got some questions.
Sorry?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I guess, there's been a movement of, not having streams, and I mean, this is a very compromised stream, covered up for drainage, and, I understand that, under the provincial definitions of fish bearing, it's not bearing fish per se, so it becomes drainage, but that any stream that doesn't have fish all of a sudden becomes a drainage. I guess, was there any effort of trying to design a subdivision kind of around the current watercourse creek, enhancing it, but trying to place things without having to touch, go around it?
Yeah, we did, through your worship, we did look at alternatives to this, an open ditch concept with riprap on the sides to maintain it open. Very, very challenging to get the lots to work in there with all the other restrictions and setbacks. So this we thought was the best, and actually in consultation with the city, they agreed that this would be the best solution. This watercourse comes from a pipe and goes into a pipe. So it's kind of, we think that the pond is the biggest benefit here of this whole area.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it's a tricky situation all around, and see what you're working with, and thank you.
And if I may, I'm going to assume that essentially this may provide habitat for waterfowl as well, given that it's a pond as opposed to a simple uncovered ditch through part of the land and covered again.
Yes, yeah, we think so. It could, yep.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move the motion that Council issue development permit number DP 1219 at 2498 Rosstown Road to reduce the minimum required watercourse leave strip from 7.5 meters to 0 meters in order to allow the proposed site work, servicing, and restoration within the watercourse leave strip area.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Gesselbrock opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now let's just get the DSA so we can build it.
Well, I'm noticing we're at 9 o'clock. If we're going to carry on past without a break, I think we need a motion to that effect.
Yes.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. The next is the alternative transportation to special events. You're opposed, Councillor Bonner?
No, Your Worship. Generally, we have a break at 9 and we have a motion at 11.
I think to carry on through the break. Well, let's put it this way.
Completely counts.
It passed, so we're going to carry on. But thank you for the technical criticism. Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, this could easily be Mr. Harding here this evening because this is around special events. And I think it's apropos of, Go by Bike Week. And, on the same evening that you've given the first two readings to City Plan, which is really about integration. I'd just like to introduce Lainey Stevenson, our active transportation specialist, and Ms. Darcy Osborne is online as well, our acting manager of events, special events. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Stevenson. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevenson, thank you very much. And if I may say, if you want to take a couple of minutes to say something about Go by Bike Week and or any other days thereof, given that you organized a nice event on Sunday, please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will take that opportunity to do a shameless plug for Go by Bike Week, which today is the first day. And thank you so much for wearing your shirts. You look great. Today we had our first celebration station. We're doing celebration stations all week for cyclers stopping by on their commutes or just on their cycles throughout the day. We had it just in front of Rona. We had over 30 people attend. We're really excited about that. And then on Sunday we had our bike parade, which was also really well attended. Thank you, Councillor Bonner and Councillor Hemmons for coming out, as well as Mayor Krogh. We also have a number of events happening. We have a bike tour tomorrow night, a historical bike tour through Nanaimo. So if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about history in Nanaimo on a bike, feel free to come by. We're going to be meeting at the train station tomorrow at 5, and we've got a couple other events happening throughout the week. So hopefully you'll all ride your bike at least once this week and get entered for some fun prizes and lead by example. So thanks for that opportunity. I'll continue on. So tonight, the purpose of me coming is to present a report that some departments at the city have been working on. So my department, the Engineering and Transportation, along with Parks, Recreation, and Culture team have been working together to provide opportunities for less vehicle travel to special events within the city this summer. So the report kind of says it all, so I'll just try and hit the highlights. But essentially through the Reimagine process and at my time at the city, we received a lot of comments from the public about wanting to find alternate forms of transportation in the city. So what we've done is we've worked with local partners, so the RDN, the Regional District of Nanaimo. We've worked with a local contractor for bike valet services to be able to provide bus shuttle and bike valet services for secure bike parking for at least 4 days of special events this summer in the city. So what we're proposing is going to get us at least 8 hours of bike valet service and 2 shuttles for 4 events. We worked with the special events coordinators, and we identified 6 of the major events this summer, or what has happened in the past, because of course we haven't had these the last couple of years, but they're coming back this summer, so really excited, and we want to get ahead of this. So we've identified the 6 most attended events, and we have the funding to fund at least 4 days to 4 different events. And the ones that we're proposing are going to be the Marine Festival VIX, so 1 day of the Marine Festival VIX, the Dragon Boat Festival, and then we have Canada Day. So we'd get the transit shuttle and bike valet to all of those events, and if funding permits, we'd hope to be able to provide that service to all 6 events or a couple of days to those events. Of course, this is going to help us achieve many of our goals in our current transportation master plan and the draft city plan, and will also help reduce single vehicle traffic and parking to these events. I think that's all of the highlights, but if anybody has some questions, I'm available, and so is Darcy on Zoom. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Stevenson. Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for yesterday's event. That was great. Do we have any goals in reducing car traffic, and are we able to measure whether this has any impact in achieving those goals?
We do have goals. So in the Transportation Master Plan, our goal, it's written in the report, is to reduce vehicle traffic by at least half or double walking, biking, and transit trips by 2041. And we also have a number of other actions in the Transportation Master Plan, which include encouraging travel to community events by walking, cycling, and transit, reducing general parking, and providing better pedestrian access to transit amenities and mobility hubs. As for measuring the success, maybe I might defer this one to Bill if you might be able to answer it.
Thanks. Worship, so I think the intention would be to monitor, both the use of the shuttles from transit hubs to special events, and to essentially watch and count the number of bike valets and to make some extrapolations for that. And it's a question that I have as well, is how do we measure the success of this and how do we go forward? So we're kind of doing it as we go, and the main thing is just to get it off the ground. I think the report highlights the sort of very assertive marketing that will be done in concert with the event organizers, as well as through our own social media channels.
I might just add to say that what we're going to do is start with 100 bikes for the bike valet, and depending on the success, so we're going to start with Canada Day. This is the first time we're doing this, so we really don't know how well it's going to go. Of course, we want to hope that all 100 spots are going to be used, and that events from there will be able to add more capacity. So I guess we'll be able to measure it on how full the bike valet parking is, and how many people are using that shuttle. Of course, we want to see it full, because that means people are using it.
Thank you. I think I'm fully in support of this. I just want to preface that. I think counting the bikes at the bike valet is obviously very, we can do that easily, but I'd be curious to get people's perspectives on if they do take the shuttle service. Like, did you take the shuttle service instead of a car today? Like, something as simple as capturing that sort of stuff, I think would probably be really good in terms of helping us figure out if we're actually doing what we want to do. So thank you. I think this is a great program.
Thank you, Councillor Himmons. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I'm sorry I was out of the room when you were introduced, so my apologies, I didn't know what your name was. My question is more to do with the shuttle service. And I'm reading the report here, and it says Woodgrove Mall and VIU would be the probable starting points. Now, I guess I kind of understood it that the person would take the regular transit down to the exchange down here on One Point Drive, catch the shuttle from there to the event, or how is it going to work?
The idea would be that people either walk or bike or take their own vehicle to one of the transit hubs, and we're proposing VIU or Woodgrove because there's a lot of parking available there if people are going to do a couple of different mobility options to get there. Yeah, there are options to add different transit hubs. Those are just the ones that we proposed and the people that we've been working with so far.
I guess I kind of thought it would be more beneficial if we just caught the regular transit and went to the hub and then took the shuttle to, but that's only my delivery background that makes sense.
That could certainly be an option if people want to take a regular route to the transit hub and then go down. But the idea with these transit hubs going to VIU or Woodgrove is that they're direct, so there's not going to be any stops. There are options to add more stops if we want to, but of course it's going to make the service a little bit slower, but just to make that direct route.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. And with Woodgrove being a private parking lot, do we have permission from the owners to do that?
Yes, through your worship. I think I missed that the first few times. Sorry about that. Yes, we have approval in principle from VIU and Woodgrove, depending on the dates. So we haven't set the dates exactly, but we have been in contact with them and they are supportive.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Stevenson, thank you very much. I certainly support this, and I hope it's successful. I think it is important, though, that we do somehow monitor the success rates so that we can see for future if our money is being wisely spent. So I hope you can figure out some way of monitoring results. And thank you also for your work on Sunday at the opening of Bike to Work Week. And I apologize I was not there, but I was actively walking at the same time in the Alzheimer's walk, because I'm afraid I relate more to Alzheimer's than I do to biking at this stage in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. If I may just add through your worship, thanks for that note, but hopefully we'll be able to see you on your bike at some point this week. And and through your worship, on another note, Go by Bike Week is actually followed by the Commuter Challenge, so feel free to walk and count your kilometers that way next week.
Perhaps Councillor Thorpe and I can get one of those tandem bicycles.
Oh, please. Please.
Councillor Brown has offered to pay money to come and watch. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Just a big thanks to staff on this, and to add to the conversation, biking, exercise, bilateral stimulation is actually a protective factor against Alzheimer's. So just throw that out there.
Thank you very much. Appreciated. The next is Strategic Priorities Fund Capital Infrastructure Stream. Ms. Mercer, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the Strategic Priorities Fund, the Capital Infrastructure Stream, is aimed at strategic investments that are considered large in scale, regional in impact or innovation, and support the Canada Community Building Fund's national objective of productivity and economic growth, a clean environment, and strong cities and communities. So this is the third intake for this stream. And under this intake, the city is eligible to apply for 100% funding up to $6 million. So staff have identified 4 projects that they felt fit this grant stream. Westwood Lake Phase 2 at $1.8 million, Stadium District Phase 2 at $5 million, Commercial Street Reimagined at $3 million, and broadband connectivity at $5.4. So it was felt that the Westwood Lake Phase 2 project was the best fit for this grant stream. And the grant deadline for this stream is June 30th. And at this date, we don't know. There is no announcement date at this point for when we would, if we were successful with the grant. So staff are here asking that council endorse the application as outlined in the report. And there are staff here to answer any questions you may have about the program or the projects.
Questions for Ms. Mercer? Move the recommendation. Seconded Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? Thank you very much. Before we actually vote on this, all four projects looked fabulous, but given the volume of use at Westwood, I think this is a good recommendation. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is the public notice bylaw. Ms. Robertson. Double duty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Until recently, advertising requirements for legal notices related to elections and development applications and public hearings, they had to be advertised in a newspaper that circulated in the community once a week for 2 consecutive weeks. And as internet access advanced, online services increased, and the newspaper subscriptions started to decline somewhat. And this created some problems for businesses who publish local newspapers, because some were either closing or reducing their publications. So for some local governments, this presented a problem. And as a result, the local governments lobbied the province through UBCM to requesting that there be some more flexibility provided for local governments for doing different types of advertising. And on February 22nd, new legislation came in effect that gave local governments the option to do just that. And so for Nanaimo specifically, we lost the Daily News in 2016, which used to publish 5 days a week. And then when COVID hit, the Bulletin reduced its circulation from twice a week down to once a week. And so how this sort of affected Nanaimo is that the difference between when council considered first and second reading of a development application before we could get to public hearing used to be a 2.5-week process when we had the papers running twice a week. But now that it's gone to once a week, it's increased that process by an additional weeks or more, sometimes up to 6 weeks. So that has affected the development community. By also looking at an alternate way of advertising, for example, through the city's website, which is what the bylaw is proposing, there would be an opportunity for a 50% savings for developers as well, because they have to bear the sole 100% cost for those advertising requirements. And also generally, for the city, it would save publications for the city as well for 50%. So prior to considering implementing a public notice bylaw, the province asked that alternate methods of advertising meet the principles of being reliable, suitable, and accessible, and as a best practice to see how your community best gets its information from the local government. And we already did a survey in 2020 that addressed that when we were launching the tool Get Involved Nanaimo. And one of the questions that we did ask was, how do you stay connected with the city of Nanaimo? And the most popular responses were the city's website and newspaper. So given that one of council's priorities is to ensure that expeditious decision-making and action occurs with development applications and cost-effective service delivery, implementing a new public notice bylaw would meet both those objectives. If supported, the newspaper and the city's website would be the 2 statutorily required methods for advertising, but that would not prohibit us from continuing to use alternate methods such as Facebook and Twitter, newsletter, and the Nanaimo News Now where applicable.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Robertson. The other one that isn't mentioned here is the news bulletin, which is an online as well. Would that be considered?
Yeah, we could absolutely still continue to do that online.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Public Notice Bylaw 2022, number 7325, to provide for alternate means of publication, pass first reading.
Seconded by Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe.
I'll move that Public Notice Bylaw 2022, number 7325, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe, please.
And I'll move that Public Notice Bylaw 2022, number 7325, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We're now on to item 13, bylaws, Code of Conduct Bylaw 2022, number 7348. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased to move that Code of Conduct Bylaw 2022, number 7348, to regulate the conduct for council and committee members be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Next item is Ethics Commissioner Establishment Bylaw 2022, number 7349. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Ethics Commissioner Establishment Bylaw 2022, number 7349, to establish an Ethics Commissioner or ad hoc Commissioner be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. And finally, Elected Officials Oath of Office Bylaw 2022, number 7350. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Elected Officials Oath of Office Bylaw 2022, number 7350, to establish the oath or solemn affirmation of office for mayor and the office of councillor be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no notices of motion. I didn't see anyone here tonight who's got, no other business. I assume there's nothing on the question period sheet, Ms. Snellgrove? Councillor Martman moves for adjournment. Councillor Hemmons seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate this.